Well, Jayne Drinkwater, thanks for joining us on International Women's Day.
My pleasure, Glenn.
Tell us, what does the day mean to you?
I think International Women's Day is always a fabulous opportunity to celebrate the progress we've made, but it's also a reminder of how far we still have to go. So the Australian Workplace Gender Equality Agency, the latest survey from 2019-20, shows that just over 50% of the workforce is now women, but only about 33% in management roles, 28% at director level, only around 18% CEOs, and 15% in board chair positions. So to me, those figures tell me there's still a long way to go before we get to parity. There are still lots of barriers in place that inhibit progress of women.
This year's theme is breaking the bias, and I know that that's something that bias and gender bias is something that you've come up against a lot in your career. Tell us a little bit about, particularly in those earlier days of your corporate life, some of that gender bias that you've come up against.
I think I was quite naive when I first started working. I think I assumed it wouldn't affect me. So this is in the Commonwealth Public Service. We'd recently passed anti-discrimination laws. We'd also got the new equal employment opportunity laws in the mid-80s. So there was plenty of reason to be very hopeful that the issue would be gone within a relatively short period of time. Of course, here we are many decades later and it hasn't. So it probably really began to hit me when I moved into management roles. And so the earliest I remember is probably mid-90s, where I started to notice I was the only female in the room, whether that was in a boardroom, whether I was the only female on a management team. And you started to notice the very subtle sometimes, other times not so subtle, indicators of being treated differently. So things like being talked over, things like having your ideas completely dismissed until somebody else in the room decides to present them back to you as their own idea. Happened to me quite a lot. And things like missing out on some of the key discussions. So the discussions that typically back then took place on the golf course or even in the men's bathroom. Right. You'd miss out on all of that. So, you know, I think it's still an issue today. I think for me, the issue became more apparent when it actually disappeared from my working life, when I was appointed to the new executive team at NIB. So the new CEO at the time had decided to replace the entire executive team, and out of a team of 6, we ended up with 4 females. And the way that changed the dynamic and the way people were listened to, the ideas that were presented, the ideas that were validated in that environment, stark difference.
And this has been a big change with the Greater Bank Board in recent years. There's now gender equality. We've got 3 women, including yourself, on the board. How has that changed, I suppose, the dynamic of the board and the way the board thinks?
I think the boardroom has benefited greatly from the diversity of thought that Catherine and Donna bring to the table. So that's not just a different perspective because they're female. They have a different range of experiences, and so we get a lot more insight into the experiences they've had in financial services, the technological background that Donna brings to the table, the risk management that Catherine has been involved in. So both very experienced governance professionals. So it's been quite eye-opening. But people have commented that we also approach things from what they would perceive to be a more feminine perspective, so that we do consider people aspects of all of the issues we're dealing with. But I think for me generally it's the excitement for me is the breadth of ideas, the way we think about things, and the comfort level that we all have now in tossing ideas onto the table that may be perceived as completely out of left field, but it's okay to toss those ideas around.
And the diversity of thought through all levels of the business, or any business, is really important as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think for me it comes down to, if you gather more ideas, you have more opportunity to debate those, you have more opportunity to come up with the best possible solution.
We spoke, you mentioned there about the board, but in terms of across all levels, why is it important that we have this diversity of thought and diversity of thinking and across all levels of the business?
Apart from being the right thing to do, there are many, many studies
Yeah.
that now demonstrate the impact on the business bottom line. So the business case is very clear that when you have diversity of thought, those different ways of thinking, when you're able to generate lots of different ideas, the impact to your profitability is very clear, but you also get a lot more innovation. You get a lot I guess, the whole talent pool to choose from. So people bringing their whole selves to work, not feeling constrained in being able to contribute to the role that they're doing, lifts productivity and therefore lifts profitability.
I want to go back to your experiences a little, when you mentioned about the gender bias that you experienced. How did you, in your own mind, how did you move past that? Because I'm sure that there's been plenty of women in your situation over the years who have got to those certain barriers, those points, and went, you know what, this is all just a bit too hard. I don't want to keep doing it. But what was it in you that allowed you to keep moving forward and progressing in your business life despite the challenges?
I think I tried all the things. So back in the 80s, I tried, fitting in with the big shoulder pads. I tried wearing the very dark corporate suits. I went on assertiveness training courses. I was told to lower my voice and not sound so screechy. I tried playing golf a few times, and as much as that was an absolute hoot, lots of fun, absolutely atrocious at it, so I was never going to be doing the big business deals on the golf course. Tried all of those things. I suspect none of that helped. The only thing that really helps, and I think it was Sheryl Sandberg who said, when we have more women in leadership, we will start to believe that more women belong in leadership.
Yeah.
So it's actually being part of an executive team where there are enough women, or being on a board where there are enough women that you don't feel like the odd one out. That's what makes the difference. So I don't know that a lot of the change for me was anything I'd done other than get on my soapbox and talk about greater representation of women. And pushing for that change in any environment that I've been in, I think that's what made the difference.
I suppose the tough thing there is that everything that you had gone through was things that you thought that you needed to change about you and your scenario and your situation, when in fact it was probably the thinking of everyone else around you that really needed to change.
That's exactly right. It's the environment. We need to stop trying to fix individual women and start fixing the underlying issue of representation.
So Jayne, along your journey, who are some of the female leaders that have really inspired you?
Whenever I'm asked this question, I always think immediately of Michelle Mcpherson.
Yeah.
So Michelle and I worked together at NIB when she was the CFO. She's now CFO at IAG. Not only extraordinarily capable, incredibly hardworking, but one of the nicest people you could ever hope to work with. So truly inspirational. I also had the opportunity to work briefly with Gail Kelly, quite a while ago now. But I think the people who inspire me today are people like Catherine Robson and Donna Vinci, our board members who've been with us, it'll be 2 years in July on the board. Serious talent, serious capability, and so enthusiastic, just bring so much of their authentic selves to every discussion we have, which is just a delight being able to work with them. I have enormous respect for Emma Brocate on our executive team here. She is one of the most talented executives I've ever seen. But we also have this incredible senior leadership group here at Greater Bank. And I really hope that we can inspire every one of those women to go on to be an executive or a CEO or a board member one day, that we can create the environment where they can explore their interests and their capabilities, and they can progress to whatever level they feel appropriate for them. Because there is just such an enormous amount of talent, and that's very exciting for us as an organisation.
Tell us about mentors. Is a mentor something that you've had along your journey, and also is it mentoring others something that you've also done as well?
I have had a few over the years, and both male and female, and I've always found them helpful. Didn't manage to keep any of them long term, I think because I was moving around different organisations too much. So yes, I'd always recommend that, particularly if you're exploring what the next opportunity might be, what you're thinking about in the future, whether you feel that you've got an area that you'd like to work on, or whether you're thinking about going into a completely new area. But yes, I often get asked if I'll just have a cup of coffee with somebody, or give some advice, or just have a catch up, or something a bit more formal. And even I think things like this, it helps. So I always try to contribute where I can.
As you said, I think the visibility is very important for everyone, and everyone here at Greater Bank to see what you've done and where you're sitting and what you're doing for the organisation. Hopefully that in itself will inspire other women as well.
I think it's hugely important. You know, the saying is, if you can't see it, you can't be it. But it changes a lot of that inherent bias. If people see women across all sorts of roles, whether that's in politics, in business, or even in the media, if we start to see more women authors, for example, if we see more coverage of women's sport, and we recently had the big launch of the Newcastle night's
Yeah.
competition, and reading about the participation at that event, and how proud many of the fathers were for their daughters to be
Most
seeing
definitely.
that sort of event. Yeah, I think it's really important that we get that visibility.
What's the biggest risk that you've taken in your working life?
Apart from leaving my very successful career just after I turned 40 and was warned I would never work again, and chopping and changing lots of different jobs, exploring lots of different opportunities for me, I think the biggest risk was probably taking on a completely new role. So I moved out of my comfort zone, which was customer service and operations, a bit of technology, and I moved into a marketing role. I had no background at all in the marketing field, and I think the thing that really struck me about that role was not only did I really enjoy it, but I was able to be successful in that role, I think, because it forced me to rely on the subject matter experts who were working for me. So all I had was some leadership and management capability, but I didn't have the subject matter expertise. But I did have an incredible group of experts working for me. So to be forced into that position where you're relying on that, I think brings out the qualities that you need as a leader to actually boost people and to give them the responsibilities that they desire, and then get out of their way and let them get on with the job.
Tell me about Imposter Syndrome. Tell me about your thoughts on it, but also your experiences of it, and how you managed to work through that.
I think it's something that I've certainly struggled with, where you'll often think that you're not qualified for a job, that you'll tentatively put in an application, and then lo and behold find yourself in a new role. And for the first 6 weeks you're thinking, my goodness, I don't belong here, they should have given it to somebody better than me. That's pretty quickly overcome when you realise that you have this ability to learn. And I think that's what I say to so many women, and the statistics demonstrate quite clearly that a lot of women won't apply for a promotion or a new role if they don't feel they meet every one of the essential criteria. That's not something you typically see with male candidates. They'll often say, well, yes, I meet a number of these, maybe even most of these, but I know I have the ability to learn on the job, that I can, take on something like this and be confident that soon enough I'll be quite capable of doing the job. So I think it is something that a lot of us need to push ourselves a little bit further, not be afraid to take a few risks, and rely on our ability to learn and to learn from others, to seek out support where it's needed, whether that's a mentor or just some additional help in the workplace, whether that's from your manager or somebody else or your own team, to actually feel that that's an okay thing to do, that you don't need to be doing it all yourself. And I had a very interesting discussion just recently with one of the senior leadership group members here at the Grader, who made a joke of saying, oh, I want it all. I want to have the career, I've been doing some study and I want to have a family, and is that too much to ask? And I said, of course not. Absolutely you can have it all. That doesn't mean you have to do it all yourself. You can go and get support from other places, whether that's at work or at home or from the community. Don't expect that having it all means you need to do it all.
You're an incredibly busy person, and you have been for a long time, but how do you relax? How do you manage to switch off, and how important is that for you in terms of your productivity and you're able to perform at your best?
I'm probably not as busy as most of the people who work at Greater Bank at the moment, to be honest. I think I've certainly been in that spot where you're working crazy hours and you're feeling that pressure. And while I was working full-time, I used to certainly enjoy the occasional holiday, and that was typically skiing or something like that. Don't do so much of that since I broke my shoulder. But for me these days, I enjoy nothing more than driving my 13-tonne truck.
Yeah.
It's my expedition vehicle, my off-road motorhome. And to me, that feeling of escaping, but being up there high and trundling down the road in the beast, as some people call it, is a delightful way to see more of our country, but also to escape what's normal for me. Sitting in a boardroom dressed up with the hair and the makeup done is quite different to being up there as a truck driver and looking down on the traffic. And I do find it very relaxing. It's a very easy vehicle to drive, and it usually means I'm going somewhere nice. But I often used to do things that were forcing me to relax by getting my head out of that space, and that's where the snow skiing holidays came in. There's nothing quite like going down a black run to make you forget about the problems in the office.
Yeah. Jayne, you mentioned that we have many talented women in the workforce here at Greater Bank. What would be your one message to those women who are looking at people like yourself and aspiring to do great things in their working life, and they may be coming up against some challenges? What's the message you would have for those women?
I think don't be afraid to take risks. I think for me it was always, as you said, that imposter syndrome, but to get outside your comfort zone and realise that you do have a lot of capability. Don't be afraid to explore different options until you find what you're passionate about. And I was speaking with Emma just last week about what we can do to assist people in more guided career paths, but also in that opportunity to explore different roles. And for me, it was certainly things like moving into a marketing role that made me see that I did have other capabilities and maybe there would be other things that I could really enjoy. But I think the other advice is, women are often told, and I think it's referred to as Goldilocks Syndrome, you're either too much or too little. So we tend to describe women as too bossy, whereas the same characteristics in a male might be described as leadership capability. Or we say to women, oh, you're not speaking up enough in meetings, you're being too quiet, you're holding back too much. Whereas others might be referred to as thoughtful. So I think it's really important to bring your authentic self to work, to not feel that you're too much or too little of anything, but to find what you're comfortable with, to own your own space, if you like, and to, if you need to, find the space where you're comfortable, where you can contribute the most. So if you're not getting the support you need to be able to do that, don't be afraid to speak up and ask for that. To make it really clear to managers and others in the organisation if you're looking to try something new. To be particularly loud about that if you think you're ready for a promotion and you're being overlooked. I think it's... You're probably going to be accused of being too loud about things anyway, and I often am. I'm told that I'm on my soapbox about this particular issue. I think that sort of fails to recognise that I've been talking about this issue for 40 years, so perhaps I'm a little bit frustrated, and that's okay.
Yeah. Jayne, wonderful insights. Thanks you for your time. No doubt it's been inspiring, not just for the women in this organisation, but plenty of blokes as well. So thanks for your time today on International Women's Day.
Absolute pleasure. Thanks, Glenn.
Thank you.